A long time ago, I played the very first Monster Hunter game, World. So of course, I had to check out the second game in the series, Monster Hunter Wilds. Throughout my adventures, there was one thing that really stood out to me. It was a new mechanic called offset attacks. These precise strikes can go toe-to-toe with gigantic monsters' most ferocious attacks, and with proper timing, you can instantly turn the tides of battle. This led me to a question that nobody has had. Can you beat Monster Hunter Wilds with only parries? I was gonna find out. The first step on this adventure was to create our hero. So, meet Bartholomew Colon 3. He might not be the hero we need, but he's the only one that was available. He claims pants affect his ability to parry, so don't expect to see him wearing any. Next up, we had to choose a weapon. Quite a few of the options were able to perform an offset attack to some capacity, but for this challenge, I decided to take the Greatsword. The offset attack for this weapon was a charge, which made it easier to time. In addition, if I didn't think the enemy was going to attack in time, I could cancel the charge with a roll to avoid damaging the enemy without a parry. After gathering my bearings in the tutorial against the Chotacabra, there was one thing I had to do. My pet Archibald, while I love him dearly, was a detriment to this challenge. He could damage the monsters and even draw their aggro. Thankfully, there was an option to have him stay behind when going out on quests, but that also meant I wouldn't be getting any free heals, and I could already tell I was gonna be getting hit a lot. In the very next battle, I learned an interesting quirk about offset attacks. After knocking an enemy back with one, future offset attacks would not have the same effect for a while. Instead, the monster's attack follows through, but you greatly reduce the damage and are able to immediately go into your strongest attack. For Greatsword, this was True Charge Slash. Since I wasn't benefiting from the knockdown attack you get when throwing the monster off balance, I used True Charge Slash to supplement that, but only if I got it via a parry. The Quematris was pretty straightforward, with the only annoying thing being its fire. When using an offset attack that doesn't knock the enemy away, status effects still get applied to you. So even though I negated the damage of its tail swing, I was set ablaze and had to roll around to put myself out. Thankfully, it liked using its beak attack quite often, which didn't have fire associated with it. Lalabarina was much the same, with another annoying status effect to show for parrying its stinger. But the spider thing more than made up for that with how elegant it was. It danced around the field, showing that it's very mindful and very demure, which is exactly what you would be if you subscribed to the channel. I've got a ton of content for you to enjoy and a lot more on the way. The game was doing everything in its power to stop my rampage. I set out for the next hunt, and my game crashed. Thankfully, everything was still intact, and it was nothing more than an offset setback. My next target was a Congalala, which is just a really fun word to say. The introduction cutscene for this monster was reminiscent of how my 7 children try to wake me up in the morning, and how I respond on days after I've had Taco Bell. Also, much like me, he folded at the first sight of conflict. I went to the desert to take on a Balahara, and I don't think I've ever had such a hatred for slopes as the one I developed during the battle. I swear, this thing loved fighting up here. I'd lure it away, and somehow, when I blinked, we'd be right back up there. It brought me so much satisfaction to see the Alpha Doshiguma put the Balahara in its place. No more slopes for you. But of course, then I had to fight that Doshiguma. This was the first enemy in the run that could be power clashed. Power clashes are similar to offset attacks in that you meet an attack head-on and you can knock the enemy away. You can trigger one of these clashes after blocking enough attacks, and much like offset attacks, you can instantly go into a True Charge Slash afterward. I figured these were rare enough and also kind of a parry, so they fit perfectly into the run. This was also the first monster that started to give me trouble. I fainted twice, and hunts run on a 3-strike system. If I got carded again, the hunt was over and I would have to spend 15 minutes parrying my way back to where I was before. There were some pretty close calls, but 10 minutes later I managed to pull out the W. And then there was Uthduna. The monster by itself didn't seem too bad, but I had Olivia with me. Playing through the game before, I thought she was the coolest character around. But doing this challenge run, she was nothing more than a nuisance. She kept stealing the creature's attention, which greatly limited my ability to parry. Like, I would be standing in the guy's face, getting an offset charged up for an attack, and my guy would just turn around and start attacking her. I got so frustrated at one point, I just sat down in a corner and let Olivia be the main character for a while. Good thing that's the only fight she helps out in, right? Regardless, hunts were starting to get much longer in general. I hadn't gotten much in the way of weapon upgrades, and it was showing. Rompopolo, another 10 out of 10 name to say, is a pretty easy hunt, but the thing took nearly 30 minutes due to my damage that was rapidly falling behind the curve. Even Ray Dow, who was extremely aggressive with his parryable attacks, took 35 minutes to tackle. The next couple of fights, while also becoming increasingly longer, weren't too bad. And then Olivia showed up again. The Ajra Khan hunt had Olivia taking on one of the fiends, and then coming to help with yours later down the line. I tried my best to work around the annoyance by playing tactically with my resources. Ajra Khan was another one of the monsters that was eligible for a power clash. I tried my best to block less while I was fighting it solo, so that when Olivia showed up, I could jump in the way and trigger a clash then. In this way, I could take the power back from my AI companion, and it paid off big because I managed to land the final hit thanks to that play. My continued damage struggles ultimately culminated against the Black Flame New Udra. Not only did he have a lot of flame-based projectiles that couldn't be parried, he was also quite the healthy, oiled-up fellow. I did notice a really nice feature of the boss during this fight though. His tentacles will glow blue when they're about to strike you, even if you've sliced off the limb in question. It helped me time my parries, and I got into a nice groove, but my timer was looking shorter and shorter. I had carded twice and I had 10 minutes left on the clock, but New Udra had just gotten the skull emoji, so I had hope. It was time to lock in or go down in a glorious blaze. I took him out with under 5 minutes to my name, and I felt like I was in trouble. Something had to change because... And praise be to Yevon, that hunt unlocked the next tier of upgrades for weapons, including the Flaming Squid's own greatsword. How fitting that my longest endeavor wound up being my greatest boon. With this new blade at my back, I was dealing twice as much damage and cutting down monsters in half the time. I even managed to get my first tail cut of the game with a backwards offset swing. And when I was tasked with fending off the game's flagship monster Arkveld, I came to a bit of a realization. With every hunt, I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants, learning the parry timings as I went. But against Arkveld, it felt like second nature, like I already had his number. I guess that's what happens when you fight him 20 times because your friend claims there's a gold crown in there somewhere. Arkveld was another eligible bachelor for a power clash, and I think I got the coolest possible ending by triggering the cutscene after succeeding at the clash. Marching toward the end game, I had to tussle with the biggest monster around, Jin Dahad. But of course, I couldn't just get a nice one-on-one. Olivia had to be there. At least in the other fights she was in, I still had a chance to parry attacks when they turned to look at her. But since Jin was a big boy and the area was so large, there was no chance of that happening here. I literally just had to stand and wait until he deemed me a suitable target again. Another instance of annoying rather than difficult, the fight took longer than it should have, but I could take solace in the fact that Olivia would never come to help ever again. Guardian Ebony Odegaran and XUWU. Guardian Ebony Odegaran and Zuwu were both quite happy-go-lucky in the swing department, so offset attacks were flying left and right. Bleed on the Odegaran was a bit annoying, but if you just crouch for a few seconds, it goes away. I was surprised that Zuwu was so basic, but he really had nothing going for him. He could throw these weird, slow-moving spikes that hardly hurt, and he could stretch his arms to move around, but otherwise, this thing was extremely milquetoast. I also want to mention the exhausted condition. By this point in the run, I noticed it in just about every monster. After performing enough attacks, the monsters get exhausted, indicated by a little hungry guy icon on the map. And every monster has this same canned exhaustion animation where they walk sideways for like 3 steps and then stand there for a second. Normally, you'd probably never notice this, but when you have to rely on the enemy attacking you in order to do damage, this animation really starts to get exhausting. But finally, after all my hardships, it was time to take on the big beast Arkveld. My tussle with him earlier in the run, plus my previously mentioned experience, meant that I was well equipped to take him down. Still, he had some tricks up his sleeve that caused me some trouble. There was a healthy mix of explosions in his moveset, and despite my best efforts, I could not parry those. Despite that, Mr. Veld wasn't that big of a challenge and only took 20 minutes to conquer. The real test of my mettle was still to come. Zoshia. This thing was a monster. I was a hunter, and the whole fight was wild. In order to prepare for the impending battle, I crafted a new greatsword out of Arkveld's dangly bits and stacked defense jewels in all my armor for maximum protection. The creature's prodigious size meant that his ground explosions were harder to dodge than Arkveld's, and his claw attacks were few and far between. The creature had a jaw attack, but at first glance, it seemed almost unreactable. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, and I was just bad. As the fight progressed, I actually found that fast bite to be my go-to parry opportunity. It only took 5 minutes to make the beast break free of his wyvern milk chrysalis, and another 7 minutes to reach the big phase transition. This is where the bulk of the fight actually took place. I was halfway through my timer, and the Proto-Fatalis was showing no signs of relenting. To make matters worse, my food benefits wore off, so I waited for the perfect opportunity and ran away back to camp where I could eat in safety. At this point, Zoshia was whipping out all of the stops. He was using fire, lightning, and more ground explosions than ever. Even the attacks that could be offset were usually accompanied by follow-up attacks, making my punish opportunities slim at best. I hardly even found a moment to sharpen my weapon half the time, and it was starting to show. Even after sharpening, most of my time was spent blocking powerful attacks that would chunk my sharpness, so yellow was where I lived my life. After a near 40-minute struggle, the creature made its final mistake. It saw fit to crush me underfoot, but my claws were ready to dig in, and Zoshia ran out of health to pay his dues. And the rest
is silence.
So, can you beat Monster Hunter Wilds by offsetting the monsters to death? Yeah, I was learning the fights as I went, so I'm sure if I did a second round of this challenge, I could optimize it way better. A lot of the longer battles were due to me getting hit a lot and having to heal, all the while failing offset opportunities. The ability to literally tank a massive attack while dealing damage and going directly into your strongest swing turns out to be pretty good. Archibald didn't really get to participate, but after doing this run, I almost feel like playing without your Palico is more fun. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you've gotten to laugh or smile today, and I'll see you in the next one. Sayonara.